Hello, everyone, and welcome to Under Review, Episode 3. As always, I'm Noah Warren, joined by Craig Eagles. And for the first time, we're going to be welcoming a guest. And tonight, we're welcoming Trent Mann of the Ottawa Senators Scout. He's been in the business for over 20 years. Just a hockey man through and through. And, even cooler for both me and Craig, he's a fellow New Brunswicker. So, Trent, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Trent, let's first of all, thanks again for coming on board Under Review here. Newer podcast. So what do you think about all this media and this Zoom? You've been there has to be some Zoom fatigue right now for all NHL scouts, and especially yourself doing really interviews for almost a year.
No, absolutely, and we go back to prior to the last draft. That we just myself, I participated in Zoom meetings with, I believe we were into the 80 different players, and that's not counting the multiple times for some of those players on top of that, and then you add on some of our guys did some interviews with players that that I didn't necessarily have to be a part of if we felt that it was it wasn't necessary based upon where we were going to take them in the draft. I knew the player well enough, and I trust our guys' opinion. So they conducted additional interviews on top of that. So when you start doing that, and then not to mention all the meetings to put lists together, and normally we would go into Ottawa for the draft, and we'd be there for a week putting together a list ready for the draft, and actually just we do a list pre-combine, and then do some changes after the combine. So it's a long process to put a list like that together, and now you're trying to accommodate people in different time zones from across the world to get on a call, a Zoom call, to try to put them together, on a small computer screen that they see. While we'd be in a bigger room with charts and large posted with names all over the place for different leagues and different different places of the world. So it was definitely different, and we made it work, and just like everyone else did. And really, my hats off to our staff, because the group of guys I work with, they were so open to it. And let's face it, we have some guys on staff that are a little bit younger, and technology is just second nature to them. And then we have some guys that are a little bit older that bring that wealth of experience in the scouting business that, they're a little more nervous with it. But our guys are pretty open to anything that allows us to do a better job. So that part makes the job, or my responsibilities, a lot easier when guys are so open to try and whatever we need to try to help make us allow us to make the best decisions.
So, going back to the draft, Trent, obviously that night it's virtual. For all this major sports, I can think of Coach Belichick sitting at his wicker table with the dog. Everybody remembers that image. But for you, you obviously probably being in contact with Pierre Dorion before the draft. How was that for you? Because you guys had, the third and fifth pick. So how are you guys all conversing on draft night?
Yeah. So in Ontario at the time, when we had to set up our area, following all the protocols that were outlined by Department of Health, and at the same time trying to have the technology available to communicate with the guys that weren't able to make it in. So European scouts, American scouts, which it makes it difficult for sure. Just trying to make sure that the technology doesn't fall apart on you, and so you have a backup plan, and then a third backup plan, and if there's a power outage, what do we do? What will happen? What can we do? And guys making sure that phones are available, and it was quite a process, because while Pierre, I'm there with Pierre and a couple of our scouts, which worked out fine, but we also need to make sure we could stay in contact with multiple scouts throughout the world. So each scout had a responsibility to make sure that, okay, well, if this goes down, then you've got to get a hold of this guy, and you're going to get a hold of this guy, and just trying to come up with all the contingency plans that you could possibly come up with on that day. Not to mention, be ready for, we had so many picks that we had to be ready for all kinds of possible trade scenarios and things that we wanted to do, or we're going to attempt to do going into the draft. And sometimes they work out, and and sometimes they don't. But it was just different because Pierre can't walk over to the table and talk to the GM and start that rolling. It's all based on phone calls, and and like I said, we have some additional staff there in Ottawa that work with us in the hockey ops that were super as far as just keeping track of things that were happening throughout the draft as well, so that we knew, okay, so this has happened. We're not surprised by that, so we can go with this plan. Or that happened, we weren't expecting that. Okay, now we've got to go to here or here. I mean, different scenarios. It was certainly different, and it worked out fine, I think, in the end, as well as could be expected. I mean, I guess the disappointing part at the end was not to be able to shake a kid's hand, meet their parents, just start that kind of second part of the relationship, because the meetings before, like those players met with, possibly every organization in the NHL, maybe multiple times, depending on who they are. So for us, it's just another face at the time that they're, and they know, where the range they could be taken in, and that this team is a good possibility. But the reality is that when it's time to pick them, that little piece that makes it so enjoyable for us and their families just didn't happen.
Trent, what's it like being on the draft floor, and how intimidating was that going way back to your first draft when you're called upon?
Yeah, I mean, the first draft I attended was in LA, and the rink in LA is so set for the corporate world and not the average fan. I remember that vividly, walking in onto the floor and saying, geez, this is so corporate. Like, they didn't feel like, I don't know how many real hockey fans with their signs they'd have space for, because it was just that type of rink, and understandably so, based on the location of the city and the type of city it is. But but just going through that process at first, just listening to the conversations and seeing, at the time was Brian Murray was the general manager, and seeing Brian execute some of the things that he did, and try to stay on top of certain things and keep the owner abreast of what's going on as well, because obviously that's their business, and so that was always that was quite interesting to watch, especially Brian Murray, who had been a guy that's been in the league forever, and had a lot of success for his years, and see somebody in kind of that part of their career where they're just so comfortable with those drafts, because they've been to so many and they've ran so many, that it was neat to see him come back with these little piece of paper that he was kind of keeping tabs on salaries and this guy and that guy, and hear him ask questions to the staff, and so that that was obviously the first time I just realized how much there was to it, not just all the work that went into it, but at the time how important that work is, to be sharp and be ready for whatever the conversation may be.
How important, sorry Nora to cut you off, but how important right now is regional scouts now more than ever? There's no crossover, Trent. So, sure, you have eyes on, but how important are those regional scouts to trust and really trust?
Absolutely. I mean, an example of that would be a lot of kids that were playing out in the BC Junior League and the Alberta Junior League, and have left and go into the USHL because they're worried about not being able to play. And so, we have coverage out west, and you got to see all those kids play when the leagues were running, and he made it a point to get out there, and and despite the travel restriction, he was driving, and then a game would get canceled, and he'd call and say, listen, this game got canceled, I'm heading here, just so you know. And just the dedication to that, and then that information, how important it is now for us to have an idea. Now the guys in the US that are able to go to the games will have an idea what we saw in Canada, or what that scout, that particular scout saw, and what his concerns were things that he liked, and now they can go and see him play and then we can at least have a conversation between multiple scouts about the same player, which, some of those scenarios that we're fortunate to be able to do. But in others, it's going to be, extremely difficult. Even tonight now, there's word that in Halifax, that scouts are going to be allowed to go, possibly allowed, to go to the games shortly. But, for a guy, I'm sitting here 2 hours from Halifax, and, unless I want to quarantine for 14 days after watching one game, I guess, I just can't get there. And so it's frustrating, and it's no different for anyone else, but we're just trying to do the best job we can and get as much coverage as we can. And we're picking away at it. And I think with those kids like that are down in the USHL, when they come back to the WHL, my understanding is scouts will be allowed to attend as of right now. But even that, now we'll have to wait to see what the quarantine rules are to go into those provinces, because we don't have someone in every province. I mean, that's, that'd be, it's not possible. And our scouting staff it's not large by any means. It's not, there are a couple of teams that do have a smaller staff. And we always pride ourselves in Ottawa on our work ethic and the pride, that goes into making sure that we know players as well as we can. That unfortunately, we only have who we have, and you don't build a staff based on a pandemic, so that's just how it is. But there, we'll get in touch with people we trust, and that not necessarily on the staff, and get their opinions and what they see and what they know, and it'll all go into the bank of information to help us make a good decision.
So yeah, Trent, obviously this has been a weird year with COVID and everything, but taking it back almost a year now, March 11th is when the NHL shut down with Rudy Gobert and everything. And I'm sure you remember this, but you guys actually played the last NHL game. You guys
Yes.
played LA, and that was the last game before everything went haywire. What were your immediate, your reaction, your thoughts when everything shut down? I mean, you're a scout, you're working, and then it's taken away from you so abruptly. So what were your emotions like that day, the next day?
Well, yeah, it's interesting. The day that it got shut down was the day I was supposed to leave on a flight that day, and word was coming down that there's not much point of leaving to go anywhere, because there's not going to be much more hockey played here. And actually that night in the OHL, I think all the games got shut down that night at the last minute as well. So I would have flown to Toronto probably that day, and caught no games. So that part worked out okay. But at the time, we were scrambling to get as much information as we could to make those decisions. And then all of a sudden, the reality hit so quickly, like you said, that then you have to switch gears and say, okay, this is one of the most important drafts in Ottawa Senator history, and there may not be another game played here before the draft, and so what are we going to do? And so then we went to work with a plan to figure it all out. But we worked, I'll be honest, I know a lot of teams kind of waited to see what was going to happen before they kind of made a plan of attack. But our group, we went to work right away on it, because we just knew the importance of the draft, and that we had to keep plugging away, because at some point there was going to be a draft, and we had to keep working. So we got on the video, and we started making arrangements for interviews. And I remember a couple of agents even laughing, chuckling a little bit, because of, you guys want to do interviews already? And I said, yeah, we're doing them. We're booking them. And because I knew there were just so many of them, that it wasn't gonna be that easy to coordinate times and time zones. And when we go to the combine at the end of the year, we go in, historically it's been in Buffalo the last few years, but the scheduling's already done. You send in the names of the players you want to interview, and someone sets the time, and you're in a suite, and the player shows up at the time, and you spend your time with them. And if you want to do anything additional, you make those arrangements. But all of a sudden, there's some kid in Germany that you're trying to interview several times, and you're communicating through an agent that's in the US and the Midwest, and I'm in Atlantic Canada, and I'm trying to coordinate for guys that in 6 different time zones to be available at that time. And so there was some, I mean, it's a learning experience for sure. I don't think there'll be too much the same again, but it's, it's been, it worked out fine. But just like I said, it's just very different.
Yeah, and I agree completely that it was probably the biggest draft in Sens history. And you guys obviously select Tim Stutzla at number 3 out of Germany, like you said. What were your thoughts on him, interviewing him? You said you're lining up interviews, getting to know him. What were your thoughts on him from afar? And then as he's gotten into the organization, how has he either changed or grew in your perspective?
Yeah, I think I'm not really surprised by how he's kind of fit in so far, because he is that type of personality. Like when you start talking to him for the first time, like the interview could go on, like, I mean, you have to set the time because they have things on the go as well. So if you say it's 30 minutes, you try to hold that, 30 minutes. But, for Timmy Stutzla, you're getting to 29 minutes and you're looking at the clock, you're thinking, there's only a minute left here and we can't, we've got to honor our word here. But it was just an easy conversation because there was no yes or no answers. It was all about discussing hockey and things, that helped him be a better player, or things that he wanted to do as a player, or analyzing his own game, or his adjustment period in the men, in the DEL, and living by himself on his own, and who helped and how it helped. And so we were trying to find out all those things because, if we were going to pick that player, he was coming to Canada. We were pretty sure that he was going to be prepared to play in the NHL right away. But what allowed him to have success in the DEL so quickly? And we needed to match that because now he's coming to the NHL in a new country and a league that, no disrespect to the DEL, but obviously, at a higher level of play for sure. And, we need to make sure that, if we were picking Timmy Stutzla, that we were ready to help support him when he arrived, so that he could be the best player he could be and have as few worries as possible. But, like, I don't know how do you plan for a kid being at the World Juniors and then flying him into Ottawa, and the poor guy, doesn't even have a suit with him. And, but, then young guys like Thomas Chabot and Brady Tkachuk and Drake Batherson and, some of those guys, they kind of just, they understand and they help him out and make him feel part of it. And, just the fact that they gave him a nickname that quickly just goes to show what his personality is like. It's just an easy guy to like and easy guy to talk to. So,
how difficult is it, Trent, for young players that might be NHL ready? And I think you just touched on it, but their game is ready, but it's outside of the game, getting them prepared for the rigors of the National Hockey League.
No, absolutely. Like Timmy Stutzla, I mean, let's face it, he went in, he lived in an apartment by himself. A couple of stories up, there was a player on the team. I'm pretty sure it was Ben Smith and his family, but that kind of looked out for him, and he had that, but he learned how to live on his own, and he learned how to manage his day on his own. And you look at a kid that's coming out of the CHL, like that may not even have an idea how to operate their bank account, and the billets doing their laundry, and they get home from at the end of the day, and the meals are prepared, and all of a sudden, these are all things that you need to look after. And HR is calling you because they need paperwork filled out, and you don't know what HR even is because where's how am I getting my paycheck? Like, those are all things that Timmy Stutzla already lived, right? He lived through that. But like if we had picked Quinton Byfield and he was in the lineup, those are all things that he would be subject to. That like how do you prepare for that? And you can't really. I think you'd have to provide support for them and help them along the way. So there's just a lot of obstacles that the average person wouldn't even think about for some of these kids.
Yeah, you mentioned in a previous answer the name Brady Tkachuk, and I'm a big fan of him and his brother. I think they both play hockey the right way, with a little bit of piss and vinegar. But what makes him such a good leader at such a young age? You know, a lot of people might say he plays the game on the edge. He might, you know, sometimes he has to maybe go over the edge. But what's made him such a good leader in Ottawa so young?
You know, it's natural. That family just kind of grew up. That's the way they do it. They don't know. He doesn't know anything different. That's just how it is. And you know, like it's time, when it's time to compete, it's time to compete. And I'm going into the fight, and you're coming with me. And if you don't like it, you're probably going to get left behind, and you're not going to be around very long, because we're going to battle. And that's how they do it. They honestly, you know, I mean, their bloodlines, it's interesting, because I met his grandfather from his mom's side at the draft. You know, nice gentleman from Winnipeg, you know, like, you know, Manitoba area. And you're just there's a little bit of Canadian old school hockey in those kids as well. And then, you know, then you talk to Keith, and you can just tell, like, there's never been any conversations about anything different in their household. That's how they do it. And so it comes very easy to him. And for us, when we were kind of starting this rebuild, you know, we talked about that in our meetings. Like, if we can get this guy, this changes a lot of things for us, because these guys don't show up very often. You know, these types of players, they don't show up very often. And in the draft, like you know, when's the last guy? Like, it's hard to find players that can play the game at that high level, and also have that kind of compete in them, that it just drags everyone into the fight. And so for us, we feel very fortunate we have him, and you know, feel he's just scratching the surface on top of that.
How important, Trent, is culture right now in the Ottawa Senators organization? And you've played a big part in changing that culture over the last decade. And really, in any rebuild, character really, really matters. So how has that changed?
Well, obviously, you know, our scouting staff, we've had these discussions, and we remind ourselves regularly about this. Like we need to pick good players, because, you know, you can't win a game if you don't score a goal. But equally, if you're not ready to play the game the right way, then you're not going to score when you should be scoring, and certainly you're not going to score when it's time that you really need somebody to step up and score. And you know, and then playoff time is another animal. And you know, like, we can say, oh well, you know, you build a team just to at least get to the playoffs, but we don't want a team that just gets to the playoffs. We want to build a team that can win, and win when it's difficult. And so we feel like the players who've taken, especially in recent years, like when we've decided to kind of reshift it and rebuild, we've made a conscious effort to pick kids that can play the game, but equally it's going to be natural in the dressing room, for this is how we do it. And it's not up for discussion, or this is just how it is. And you know, we feel we got some more pieces there. And you know, you watch Timmy Stutzla, like, you know, like, he's a skilled player, but he's a competitive kid. And you know, I go back to the World Junior game against Canada, when they were getting pounded hard by Canada. Like, he wasn't giving up. He didn't stop, and he didn't stop pushing on his teammates to be better the next shift as well. And that's how you win, right, with those types of players. And you know, the Jake Sandersons of the world. I mean, he played more minutes than any other U.S. player in the finals against Canada. And that's, you know, like, we picked him, and the next morning the coach found him. And I was on with the Dieppe Flyers last night having a chat, and we were talking with some players, and I was telling them the story. Like, this is no word of a lie. The next morning, the North Dakota coach went into his office the next morning early, and the music was blaring, and he thought that the guys left the music on in the gym, and he went in to turn the music off, and Jake Sanderson was in there, and it was 6 a.m. in the morning, whatever time the coach normally comes in, and Jake was in there working out, and it was supposed to be a day off. And they said, like, Jake, this is supposed to be a day off. He goes, Coach, when, you know, every day you take off is one day you're behind. And that's, you know, he doesn't know. And you know, any kid we interviewed from the U.S. development program, if you asked him in the gym, you know, like, if you're pushing yourself to get, you know, to do more in the gym, who do you want to go up against to help you get there? And like, it's without hesitation, it's Jake Sanderson, Jake Sanderson, Jake Sanderson. And it was multiple, like, players, just that's who that's the name that came up, and it was very, very clear, that Jake Sanderson was the leader there, and he's not in your face guy. He's just pushing every day. And as we say, practice. Like who do you battle against to help you get better one-on-one? Well, it's got Jake Sanderson. Like there was no hesitation with those guys, and so he was the guy. Like he's gonna bring, just a whole package to Ottawa, beyond just a kid that can skate and can move the puck. It's going to be a full package, and quite frankly, when you're rebuilding, you have to acquire pieces like that, and those pieces, no one gives you those pieces, and so you have to be ready to take them when they're there, and so and I can go down the line. I mean, you guys know, Igor Sokolov, like who's worked hard on the Quebec League over the last couple of years, and Igor Sokolov, and and the reports, from the coaching staff in Ottawa right now with his work ethic and his compete, like he just wants to get better every time he's out there, and so. I mean, there's a theme to who we pick for sure. When you dig down, you meet the kids for sure. Obviously, different positions and maybe a different type of skill set, and they still have to have skill, but there's a theme for sure.
So talking about Sanderson, in your tenure with Ottawa, how has the thought of the U.S. National Development Program drafting NCAA players changed, say, in the past 5 years, compared to when you started?
Yeah, I think now what's happening is that there's teams that are recruiting players and understanding that it's only a 1 or 2 year deal, with those younger players. So that's an interesting piece, because before, once upon a time, it was kind of, you're picking up these kids as free agents in the college, and now they're going there younger, and the coaches are accepting of the fact that they're going to leave after a year or two, and that's okay. But they understand that the cycle, they'll have to continue working on their cycle, just more, with a shorter time frames in mind. And I think that's the kind of the biggest thing, is that these players just aren't staying as long, so the turnover is much greater. I mean, I won't kind of say which ones, but I just think there's some conferences in the college loop that better prepare players for the pro game than others.
Right.
Trent, looking at the Maritimes, and obviously this is home, right?
Yeah.
How far behind and are players, up and coming players from the Maritimes, basically versus from players from abroad? And do you think that gap is closing rapidly?
I believe it's closing, because I think that we're offering a little bit more to them. So, for example, like this summer program that Derek Cormier and through that Peak Fitness are doing, like that's something that really hasn't been available to players in this area before. And I look at last summer, just compared the summer before, and how it took another step in improving what they delivered. And in just kind of casual conversations, some of the things that they're looking to offer in this coming year that kind of takes another step. And they'll continue to get better as they go along, because they want to get better and they enjoy and love what they do, that's who you want players to be around, because they're fighting to get better every day, which means that you'll get better every day. So I think the opportunities for our players to bridge the gap a little bit are starting to be there for them. I think there's still a little ways to go. I think there's some pieces there that I think still could be, if we could find a way to include, would help. For me, it's the skating piece is always a piece that seems to be missing. I know there's a couple local groups that do it, but most times it's in larger groups and might not necessarily be geared just towards hockey as well. And I've been to Halifax and watched, Jill Plandowski on the ice with players, and we've had players down there. I had my son down there. Drake Batherson's done the work there. Igor Sokolov's done, and she does an excellent job of that. But some, in Moncton, Dieppe area, to not have that, and quite honestly, I sent my son to Lloyd Watling as a young kid too, and Lloyd did an excellent job of, I think for my son at 6'5" has pretty good edge work and agility, and that's based on Lloyd. And Mateo was always a big kid when he was younger, and he expressed an interest to want to play the game at a higher level. And I just said, listen, a bigger kid, it's harder, but the skating, as you get bigger and you get awkward, and this would make your life a lot easier if you did this. And he spent a few summers with Lloyd, and Lloyd did a wonderful job with that part. And but equally, there's a business piece there where there's a lot of players on the ice, and that's their model, and that's fine. I don't have anything against that. What I'm saying now is that we need to find something that's more geared towards that player. Once they get to the higher level, those guys are dialed in, and they need more, and they need something more individualized than necessarily as a group, and so what one player needs might not necessarily be what the next player needs. So I think that's a piece that needs to be added on. And I know Derek has had discussions with different people about that as well. And I don't know what their solution will be, or if they'll come to something, but I really believe that it's a piece that needs to be incorporated for young players to take another step.
So working for this long in hockey, Trent, I'm wondering, over your scouting career, has there ever been a player that you really had to stake your claim on and you had to battle for kind of in the room? We hear about these stories where, other people might be saying, I want him, but you were staunch for this player. You wanted to draft him, and you either got your way or didn't get your way. I'm just kind of interested in hearing those interesting stories.
Yeah. I guess, the fun part about the group that I work with in Ottawa, like that amateur staff, like our guys are excellent at battling out for a player. And at the end of the day, when the meeting's done, we go and we can sit down and have a beer together in a conversation. And it's just like that argument never happened. But our guys battle, and it's enjoyable. It's actually almost a little entertaining at times. But what it does for me is that I listen and take it all in, and I know like what I'm missing on that player because I haven't seen as much as another player. By the time they're done, I know the player, and that's how I can make a call at the end, and they understand, like, eventually if a call has to be made, ultimately falls on me, and if there's a mistake made, then I'll take it. I'll take it. That's fine, but I can't make a good decision without their information, and it's not just about me. And we've had some excellent battles over the years about some players, and we've had some good laughs later on because of the fact that the discussions got so heated. But we've been able to turn the page, and we've stayed pretty close as a group. So. So that part, I guess, that part's fun. The Drake Batherson was an interesting one for me because we didn't get a lot of viewings on Drake that year because, I saw him at when they had those little rookie tournaments in August. They don't have them anymore, and I saw him play that year, and I remember seeing him play the year before, but he only played like 10 games the year before in Cape Breton. But I happened to see. I think I've seen him play twice of those 10 games just by fluke. And I had some solid reports about him, but he just wasn't a kid that stuck. So it's not like you're chasing him around the Maritimes. And then he made the team that year. I saw him in August, and I remember Mateo watching the game with me too. We were kind of saying, like, how good. And I knew his dad because I knew of his dad, I guess I should say. And so the name rung a bell to me. And then you watch follow up and you see him play and you think, this kid, he's their best forward. He's their best forward. And you're kind of thinking, geez, like, I don't like, where's this going? And, and then in December, just before the break, they played in Moncton, and I ran in. I saw his parents and the whole family kind of sitting at one corner of the rink at the Coliseum, and I just went up to his mom and asked. I said, "I assume you're Drake's mom," just to get a little information on what was going on. And I said, "So who's his agent?" And at that time, he had just acquired an agent, and his mom had said, "We've had an awfully tough time getting someone to represent him." I said, "Geez, that's interesting." It was, anyway. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of people like kicking their ass there now, but it was Brian Dubé that had taken him, and so from there, it kind of followed him and kind of kept in contact with Brian Dubé to see how things were going, and I remember going in the playoffs. I drove down to Sydney one day for a playoff game, and the only one that was there was myself and Mark Hunter, and Mark Hunter had flown in from Toronto just to see him play, and so that kind of gave me a feel for where he probably would be going in the draft, and if we were going to pull the trigger, that I had an idea where it was going to be, and so we got into the draft, and it was interesting because we only had 4 picks in that draft, and I was kind of hoping that that year we'd be able to take him with our 4th pick in that draft. It was kind of what I was hoping, but knew that it was just based on the information I had that it was just going to be too late. So we interviewed him at the draft. I brought him into the boardroom, and he sat in front of a lot of people, and the poor kid, I felt bad for him, but he handled himself real well, like typical Maritime. Was able to talk hockey, and you could tell just a good kid, and our the staff really liked him, and took a liking to him, and you could tell he just wanted to talk hockey, and so it came down to we're at the draft, and I one of our senior guys on staff, I just said to him, what do you think? Like, he goes, Trent, you like this kid? He goes, I haven't seen him as much as you, but I like him. He says, the staff thought he was awesome in his interview. Just take him. And so that kind of nailed it in the coffin, and pulled the trigger on that one. The other one is Shane Pinto. Shane Pinto was a tough one too, because there was something going on a little earlier, like a possible trade, but we were going to have to give up a pick to move up to take a certain player, and we held off on doing that, and I kind of held my ground on Shane Pinto a little bit on that one, even though the staff were leaning a little bit more towards the other player, and I understood why, but I had a hard time giving up the pick at that time in my own mind. And so through conversation, I said, "Listen, I think I'd like rather do this," and we discussed it, at the table, and so we held off and we took Shane Pinto, and I think that's going to serve us well in the end. Since we've taken him over his 2 years, I mean, we couldn't ask for more than what he's done for us, so far, or for himself, I guess. But I'm anxious to see him in the pro game. I think he's ready, and he's keen, and he's itching to play pro hockey. So
the Batherson story is pretty unique, because I still remember watching him in August, and I'm like, who's this American kid? I didn't know, because I'm like, who's this? This guy's unbelievable. He's like a man amongst boys. And I know, and you're looking at 15, 16-year-olds and the odd 17, and he was 17. He was just head and shoulders above everyone else.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, you guys take him, and then World Juniors come around, and there was talk, and I'll never forget this. There was talk of, well, he's not going to make it because he's not part of the program of excellence. He's not going to make it. And word kind of got to me, and we're doing Facebook Live stuff on Rogers TV. And I'm like, I'm telling the boys, it was Chris Dobson and Chris Corey. I said, guys, I'm going to go off tonight. And well, Eags, what are you going to talk about? I said, I'm going to talk about ghost rosters and Drake Batherson. And they're like, okay, whatever. And the the Q, Russian game was just there the week before, and all eyes were on him, and he played spectacular in that game. So it was just like, okay, now we've got a lobby to get that kid on Team Canada. Like, he was the best player in the queue at that stage, and we're lobbying to get him. But how difficult is that for the organization and for you to try to make sure that your players are represented at that level?
Almost the same story with Thomas Chabot. Thomas Chabot was never part of under 17. He was never part of Team Quebec. He was never part of those things. And he had some impact on the World Junior team when he played as well. And it was the same thing, we were just it was always like we were being told they have a chance, but it was never they're all in. And for our guys, we just keep telling, listen, like, just keep playing well. People are watching, but so you have to make sure that there's you can't play yourself off of this. Like you just kind of stay the course, play your game, make sure you stay with some consistency, and don't give them any reason to be an easy cut. And both guys, obviously, they that says a lot about them. It says a lot about not just their abilities, but just them. And those guys that they're told that they can't, and they step up and they show you that they can. You can't help but love them, So Drake's one of those guys that he just, he was, I think in Bantam he was 5'3" or whatever, and he was too small, and then he wasn't good enough, and then he wasn't fast enough, and then he, and it's just, and it doesn't matter with him. He's a competitor, and and it doesn't matter what he does. He's just a competitive guy. So I know him and his dad have been in some competitive battles on the golf course too. So they come by it honestly, I think.
A defenseman who made his season debut last night, Erik Brandstrom, who you guys kind of got as one of the centerpieces in the trade for Mark Stone. Where's his game at right now, and where does the organization see his ceiling as a player?
Yeah, you know what? I think it still remains to be seen what he's going to be able to do, like what his ceiling will be, because first of all, he's mobile, he has puck skills, and he's fairly solid for a guy that doesn't, average height. And what he did do last year is it was important for him to go in the American Hockey League and learn a little bit more about managing the game, and not necessarily, just using your skill and your abilities to just outskill everyone. And he had to learn that there's times where you go and there's times you don't go, and there are times where you have to make certain decisions. And if you do those things, your game is going to be so much better, and you're going to be able to play and have some impact at the NHL level. And so he was receptive to that last year. I think there's a few things on the off ice from I use the word fitness loosely because it's not. It's because now there's just so many things they know off ice from a strength and conditioning piece that was going to help him be better on the ice. And during the pandemic downtime, our guys worked with him, and he dialed in on it, and he came ready this year. And unfortunately for him, the COVID piece where he had to sit out and he's quarantined, and just bad timing for him. But it was nice to see him get in last night, because he is one of those guys you feel bad for, because he's just tough luck since he's arrived as far as the whole COVID scene, And but last night I thought he looked good, and I thought he managed the game better than he did a year ago coming out of camp, and he's shown a better maturity in his game. And everyone's so itching to get guys to the next level so quickly all the time, and everyone is different. Drake Batherson wasn't quite ready last year. He had the skill, but he just wasn't quite ready as a player to be a regular. And then you watch him last night against Montreal, and he threads that pass on the power play, and you're thinking, geez, there's not many guys that do that, and he brings the puck in. Drake brings the puck in on our power play. It makes that that move at the blue line on their defender, and and it's like, geez, like not many players can do that. But when you just put it all together, it's not that easy sometimes, and every guy can't be on the same time frame, and Erik Karlsson's the same thing. You just need a little time to kind of put it all together to make sure that he has some impact, because then they can just confidence grows, and then they keep getting better. But if they're not ready and the confidence goes, then it's now they're heading down, and you're kind of starting over with them, trying to build up not just their game but also their confidence, and then that's a bigger task for sure.
Your coaching staff has done a tremendous job, both in and you have to be biased in your coaching staff and with your brother in Belleville, but honestly, your coaching staff has done a tremendous job developing young players and setting them up for success. And I know success right now is hard to come by with playing in a very competitive league in a rebuild year. But how would you rate both clubs right now with regards to all the variables and the intangibles that we've already talked about, Trent, with regards to character and compete level? Obviously, losing by 4 or 5 goals is tough, but what are you seeing and how are you evaluating that right now?
Yeah. Well, when you watch the Ottawa Senators right now, I mean, the lack of wins gets frustrating. So it's easy to get down and negative about that. But at this point in time, when I'm watching, if Drake Batherson is contributing, if Timmy Stutzla is contributing, if Brady Tkachuk is doing some good things out there, and Josh Norris and Thomas Chabot and Erik Brandstrom had a solid night last night. Like those are and even look at like Colin White. There's a guy that was scratched early on, and he's come back in and he's given us that element of speed and the element of compete, and he's getting chances to score, which is always a good sign. So even if the numbers aren't there, the chances are there. If those guys are having some impact in the game, then I'm not so worried, because those guys are the guys of the future anyway, and they're coming and they're getting better, and then there's a group that's coming up underneath them that's going to push them as well to be better, and that's what we're looking to do, and I think that Troy and his staff, that's what they do, is they prepare those players so well, is that when they come up, they're ready to challenge and push those guys. So I'm sure, like I'm positive when Alex Warmington comes up, whatever that is, he's going to be ready to push somebody. So if you're a left winger, you better be ready to go, because if Alex comes in, you might be on the outside looking in, because he's going to push you he's going to push you to be at your best, or he's going to take your spot. And that's the philosophy we're trying to, and the approach we've tried to build there between, between the two clubs. And then, with the drafting, obviously that's what we're trying to draft, kids that are they're going to continue to push. So, when a kid like Jonathan Asper goes up, you better be ready to compete, because he'll outcompete you all game long. If you're not ready, you're going to look silly, because he's going to do it. And I believe that kid's going to play NHL games at some point, and it might not be today or tomorrow, but at some point he's going to play NHL games, and that's why, because he's worked at his game, and that compete battle is always there, and as long as we can continue to kind of fill from underneath with those types of players, I think the Ottawa Senators will always be in good shape, because that's what the environment's going to be, and that's what the expectations are going to be, and if you can't fulfill the expectations, then that's fine. You'll move on, and somebody else will. And and that's it sounds kind of harsh, but at the same time, how do you win otherwise? The teams win because they push harder than the other team, and they've decided that they're not going to lose, and so that's what we're trying to build at this point in time.
No, absolutely. I think I can speak for Craig in saying that you guys are building a really strong core in Ottawa, and there's definitely some promise on the horizon here. But Trent, we know you're really busy, and you didn't have to take the time to talk to us tonight, but we both really appreciate it, and just thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. It's always an enjoyable time to talk hockey. So, it's my pleasure if I can help out. I love to help out. So,
Well, thanks, Trent, for this. And we'll have to have you as our first repeat guest on the show very, very soon. Thanks,
yes,
Trent.
hopefully when Ottawa has more wins.
Yeah.
For sure.
No,
Thanks,
absolutely. But thanks again to Trent and everybody who's tuning in. Thank you for supporting us. We'll be back Monday for episode 4. Have a great weekend and take care.